So I've always been really founder driven. And I think when you find the right intersection of founder and market, magical things happen. I think what I take probably most from venture is getting the right 2 or 3 people into each team is a huge differentiator, right? Like if I had pulled somebody out of our pickup basketball game to start Angel City with me who wasn't Julie, I don't think I'd be sitting here. It's like it was who she was and our dynamic and running through walls and so like being innovative. So I think like a lot of people get team building wrong. Like the best thing sometimes we can do for teams when we scope out lots of really operational projects is source talent from our network, interview that talent, give feedback. So I think exceptional talent and sort of a founder mentality, even if you're in a sports team, and those people want to work with people like us, right? Who can have the joy, have the energy, have the inspiration, push them in certain areas, create a safe space when things go wrong. And that's very similar, I think, to being a founder in tech, and what makes certain companies work and certain companies not work.
Hello, and welcome to Franklin Covey on Leadership. I'm your host, Will Hodling. In these conversations, we'll speak with great leaders about the mistakes, mindsets, and methods that help them become the people they are today. We hope that their hard-earned insights accelerate you on your journey. Today's guest is Kara Nortman. In 2020, Kara Nortman co-founded with Julie Ehrman and Natalie Portman the NWSL expansion club Angel City FC, which has gone on to become one of the league's leading teams. More recently, she co-founded the Monarch Collective, a $250 million fund that's investing in women's sports globally. Prior to her time at Monarch and Angel City, she was a leading venture investor as a managing partner at Upfront Ventures, one of LA's top funds, and prior to that worked in corporate M&A at IAC, among other roles. Additionally, she was my lead investor and board member at Strive, the company that I started and built before selling to Franklin Covey 5 years ago. I'm incredibly excited for today's conversation. We will discuss her experience moving from venture to sports investing, the lessons that she has learned personally along her career journey, and many of the great people that she's worked with. Kara Nortman, welcome to Franklin Covey on Leadership.
So excited to be here with you, Will.
Wonderful. Well, this is a very special episode for me as Kara was the lead investor in my startup Strive. We met probably 8 years ago, and she has been a close friend and mentor and on my personal board of advisors ever since. And so very excited to talk with you today and share all the wisdom that you have shared with me over the years, bring that to our audience.
Can't wait. Really thrilled to be here with Will. You're a special person to me and love this podcast series.
Awesome. So you had an incredibly impressive career in finance. You were a banker, you were a deal maker in corporate M&A, you helped incubate Tinder at IAC, you were a venture capitalist, a managing partner. And then 6 years ago, I guess a little bit longer than that, you did something crazy and left all of that behind and started a professional women's soccer team. What prompted your interest in women's soccer and caused you to leave this illustrious career for something quite new?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've realized reflecting back on this that I've always, just been curious. And a lot of people talk about their curiosity. And so sometimes that curiosity goes into your main job and sometimes it goes into hobbies and women. And sometimes it just goes into, reading an article in The Atlantic and talking about it at dinner and letting it go. And women's soccer kind of crept up on me, honestly, and it really surprised me. I wasn't looking for it, right? People ask me all the time, did you play soccer in high school or college? The answer is no. I played other things, but I peaked in soccer at about 11. But I mean, what happened for me was candidly, I went to a 2015 Women's World Cup game, a finals game with my 3 daughters, my husband, my parents. And my parents said, hey, why don't we go? This would be fun. And I said, yeah, that sounds fun. We went up to Vancouver and had the time of my life. And I think, it was the first time the women had won the U.S. team had won the World Cup in a while. And to the team, the players, but also the environment, like the face painting and the fans, it just felt very different than a lot of the men's sports I had been to. And I'd always been a big sports fan and played sports, but it was never something that was professionally on my mind. So I guess what I would say is coming out of that, I felt a huge amount of energy and joy. And so what did I do? I do what every American thinks about doing. I tried to go buy stuff to capitalize on my joy. And I went to a bunch of stores to find jerseys for my girls, couldn't find any, came back to try to find content, couldn't find anything. And that's where my curiosity clicked in, where hundreds of millions of people had watched this game. And I was like, how could you have hundreds of millions of people watch something and have as much fun potentially as I did? And then there's nowhere to go and take that fun and do more with it. And so the way it kind of came up was like, I almost call it like joyful irritation now. It's like, where are you joyful, where you're irritated, and where you're curious. And when those three things intersect, then you find yourself thinking about it and talking about it and bringing it up as small talk and every other work meeting that has nothing to do with it. You kind of pay attention to it. But I didn't even know to pay attention to it. That's my retrospective advice. But it did lead, and I can pause here and go further down the story or not, but it led to like years of what I realized was like pretty consistent, now market research, but it began as small talk. And then it led to, more of a nonprofit path, which then led to sort of an impact oriented for-profit path. But it surprised me. It was not something I was looking to do. And then it became one of the most impactful things I could imagine doing in my life, was starting a professional women's soccer team with my two co-founders, Julie Ehrman and Natalie Portman.
A lot of people are curious about things. Most people's curiosity ends with following a couple of new accounts on Instagram or buying a book on Amazon. Your curiosity led you to starting a professional soccer team. So congratulations on being incredibly high agency. Talk to me about, let's fast forward from that 2015 game where you look for the jersey to kind of 2019 or so, where you get the inspiration to start Angel City. How do you meet Natalie Portman? And then how did starting Angel City come about?
It's kind of funny. I randomly on my desk right now have my Kindle and the current journal I'm writing in. And so like, I have a lot of curiosity too. I read a lot, I write a lot. 95% of it doesn't go anywhere. So I do think we all have a lot of things we let go, and it's important to let them go. And then it's like really paying attention to where you don't let something go and not needing it to be anything, like releasing control around it. I didn't need it to become a soccer team. It's what unfolded over many years. But flash forward to 2019, as part of my curiosity journey, I got to know some players, Alex Morgan, Megan Rapinoe, Crystal Dunn, Ashlyn Harris, and or Kelly O'Hara, they were part of my education. But I also became friendly with the woman who ran the U.S. Women's National Team Players Union and became an advisor there as they were doing their early name and likeness work and working on pay equity. And so it kind of all revolved around that. And I started like building community and bringing people in to work with the U.S. Women's National Team Players Union, with the union, right? And I'm now on the other side of that, but it gave me like my perspective going into sports was more of a player perspective, and how do you build a sustainable ecosystem perspective. And it was something I just believed in my soul that didn't have a capitalist dynamic to it. It was pure, really pure for me. And so I pulled Natalie into the pay equity fight. We met in a crazy way. I made like a call to action on stage. We were both at an event. I said, make a new friend, give them your number. If they're weird, block them. She gave me her number. Here we are, So every occasion, people give out your number and just block them if they're weird, because some people are. But some people you might start a professional sports team with. You never know. And she actually, I still have the text exchange somewhere. I was sort of like writing these impassioned texts to her about the union and how to get the players set up in the right way. And we were going back and forth. And she said, like, why don't we start a team? And I thought she was kidding, but she wasn't. And I have a pretty serious growth mindset, but in a way, she helped me dream even bigger than I was able to dream for myself. And I do think it's important to surround yourself with people who don't just compliment you, but like help you really express those dreams in ways that might feel uncomfortable. And I said, Natalie, like, this is kind of nuts. And she said, but don't you know how to do it? And I said, well, parts of it, like raising capital, building a team, but like stadium, never built a stadium. But you know what? I said, let me figure it out. And I pulled in the woman who became our third co-founder, Julie Ehrman, to be the day-to-day kind of CEO and run the team. And then, we went through a crazy journey to figure out how to fund it. And we ended up doing it venture capital style. It's still possibly the only C Corp in mature leagues in the US, where we raised just shy of $1 million 3 weeks before COVID into a $6 million valuation in a convertible note. And the three of us owned 100% of it, and then we're diluted down by that. And we continued to raise capital venture capital style. But that was before we had a license to operate a team in LA, a stadium to play in, a single player. And we ended up, being fortunate enough to partner with and play at an incredible stadium where LAFC plays, get a license to operate a team in LA, which is pretty hard to do now. We paid very little for that because it was risky. And then we built the team from 0 to 30 million in revenue that first year, mission at its core, and ended up with more season ticket holders than an NBA team and an NHL team here in LA. And we kind of surprised ourselves as to what was possible.
That original rocket ship trajectory is amazing. The 0 to 30 million in revenue. I know also you had bigger sponsorship deals than a lot of NHL teams. You had an amazing kind of foundational deal with DoorDash that I think was the biggest for the league at the time, and maybe probably still the biggest in the league. Why was there so much pent up demand that nobody else had realized?
I mean, what Becca Rue, who runs the National Team Players Union, said to me is we needed someone to think like a venture capitalist. We needed someone to think like an entrepreneur. And most people in women's sports, if not all people, because like there's so many people who came before us, Billie Jean King and Julie Foudy and just so many people, right? But we're looking at, okay, show me the P&L, show me the data, show me a time when a team actually built commercial revenue. And there really weren't any examples. We were the first, group, and we now have an HBS case study on it, which I'm really proud of, that built a commercial P&L and showed that the demand was there, and that this wasn't like, just do it because it's the right thing. Like it needed to be, we do give back to community and take 10% of every sponsor contract. And, with DoorDash, for example, we've put $1 million into delivering free food to food insecure parts of LA. And we do that with every sponsor partner at Angel City. And then with every team we work at Monarch, which is the women's investment fund, sports investment fund I started. Every team has kind of a version of this around how they engage in community. But, ultimately, a lot of this was like figuring out how to make it simple and then showing up and being excellent. And so the simple part, I realized, like, as we got like no after no after no, and Will, you and I can fundraise for things we believe in, and like, really, this is hard. But I realized, like, the one thing you needed to get people to believe is that you could get 10,000 people or more to show up 12 times a year and have a great time. That's how many home games we were going to have for Angel City, and every other revenue metric would flow off of that. And when you could reduce it down to that and explain to people how, like, yes, LA has, 9 or 10 professional sports teams, 2 college teams that are like professional teams, the mountains, the beach. But this is why 12 times a year people are going to want to come do this. It kind of it simplified it down to one metric people could grab onto. I found a team that had done it before for a year and then was decommissioned. So there was like one data point I found out in the world. And then Julie and Natalie and I showed up, and we would sit in meetings, including with, sponsor partners, et cetera. And we told them, like, here's what we're going to do. Right. And it is a little venture capital style. As you go and you say, DoorDash committed to us before we had a single season ticket sold or a single player. And we said, but listen, we are going to fill stadiums. We are going to activate in different ways. But they weren't just hearing it from someone who'd run 3 teams or had made a ton of money somewhere else. Like, we were founders, we believed it, when we lived and breathed it, and then we did it.
Yeah. I've heard you talk in the past about how really the product you're building is a community and an experience, not a sports team. What have you done differently with Angel City that has made it such an incredible experience for fans and such a strong community that lasts beyond the games?
I mean, it's interesting. I write about community to myself almost every day. It's a part of our mission at Monarch. It's a part of our mission at Angel City. And it is really like the way I live my life personally. So I think, and no one's perfect, but what we did is we just naturally built community in every part of the business, right? And so it started, honestly, with our early investors, and where, we had kind of every MAC event you could imagine, though maybe there are more we could imagine now, but you had almost every MAC event you could imagine in the early days of Angel City. We raised capital just before COVID, when like you didn't know if people were going to go back into stadiums ever again, right? We banked with Silicon Valley Bank. Like, we had a lot of really interesting things happen in our time as entrepreneurs. But to answer your question, what came up for me is we started doing these Zooms during COVID, which, I remember when people were like hankering for Zooms and having cocktail parties, but we started that early. And I brought in my tech friends, and Julie brought in her entertainment friends, like from the business side, and Natalie brought in her actress friends. And then we all seemed to like get incredible athletes who meant the world to us to want to be a part of it, like Mia Hamm and Julie Foudy. And these people would all show up for these Zooms and we tell them what we were doing. And it was like the athletes wanted to meet the tech people or the actresses. And so we started building community in different ways that were sort of meaningful at that moment in time. And then we really built it at the stadium, in the way like we have a room where everyone still goes in when they come to a game and they have a meal beforehand. And people would buy tickets with their friends. And then people would become friends with the people next to them and like invite them to holiday dinners. And I hear from people all the time about this still, what it means to certain communities. And then we would build Fan Fest. Ultimately, we started the team to build an incredible experience for the players. Like that was the original origin for me personally, and then to build an incredible experience for fans. So it's how does that translate all the way through? And then how do we work with our sponsor partners so they're a part of it? I mean, I'm, as you know, having a big birthday party this weekend. I sponsor partners coming to my birthday who've become friends. And so I think it is like finding camaraderie, enjoying people's company, creating repeatability, and being authentic. Like a lot of people show up when something works and are doing it. They think they're doing it to make money more than they are for the purpose of it and the community part of it. I think when you can find those two things going hand in hand, you are going to drive better economic and financial returns. And it's the first place in my life where impact and purpose lines up with driving returns, because it is what I love to do and talk about and watch and travel to. I feel like I was the Forrest Gump of women's soccer in some ways. And I do think that translated into all parts of the business.
Get beyond the scarcity mindset to focus on more of what matters. Franklin Covey's guide, Leading Through Uncertainty, helps leaders connect to their purpose, concentrate on what they can control, and prioritize their most crucial initiatives. Grab your free copy from the show notes to lead with intention amid ongoing disruption. I'm so glad that you said authenticity there. It was interesting. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, Kara was the lead investor for Strive, my startup. And I would hear you talk about other startups you're investing in, enterprise software, et cetera. And you're always passionate about it. But when you talked about Angel City, your eyes totally lit up. And it was like this perfect combination of what you love doing every day, your broad kind of lifelong purpose coming together. And I think you had such incredible founder market fit, and that authenticity, that joy rang through the product itself. So I'm really happy that you dove into that passion and followed that curiosity to ultimately build it.
And Will, you call me a mentor, and I don't know if you remember this, but at some point in time, I also asked you to be on my personal board of advisors, and you were one of the founders who gave me feedback on how to be a better board member and investor to you. But you also could see that, the authenticity and reflect it back. And in the normal spot where I do podcasts, I have the soccer ball that you gave me when I'm just not there right now. But I think that's another piece of it. It's how I felt with Julie and Natalie as well. It's like being with people who help you see yourself and who lift you up when you're down and who you lift up when they're down and who give you hard feedback. And actually, you're probably the founder that gave me the hardest feedback. So, but I appreciate you saying that. And I think another really important piece of it is it really, really was a team effort. So Julie ran the team day to day, extraordinary. Natalie, it like was really involved in meaningful ways. But there's so many members of the original team who, without which we wouldn't be here, who I work with in different ways, who run other teams now. And so in some ways, I think of us as like the PayPal mafia of women's sports. Like our head of revenue is the president of the Valkyries. Our chief of staff and strategy is the COO of Gotham. And there's so many stories like that. And it's really been a special community in every part of the organization.
That's awesome. For people who are interested in more of the Angel City story, there's an incredible HBO documentary about that first season. And it all has a very happy ending, and that they sold a controlling stake in the team to Bob Iger, CEO of Disney. And so it all worked out incredibly well. I want to move from Angel City to Monarch Collective, your current investment vehicle, company, firm, fund, et cetera, all of the above. One of the things that I've always admired about you is how intentional you are about your career. I think maybe sometimes you're too intentional and can kind of get into your own head about some of these changes. But I am sure moving from being a managing partner of Upfront, where you had a lot of great investments, to leaving it and going into the women's sports world was really hard. Talk me through that decision, and then maybe explain to everyone what Monarch is.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, almost got emotional there as I'm reflecting on the last 5 or 10 years right now in particular, as I'm going into a milestone birthday. And I was thinking about this. I've always loved what I do. I've always been fortunate to work with great people, and Upfront was no exception to that. It's where I thought I would be forever. And so it was quite surprising to realize. And then when you're in a job, and in a job like tech, without even realizing it, certain things get marked. You mark it to yourself. You tell yourself stories that these are the best things to do, right? Enterprise software, SaaS, AI, and it's really hard to take a step out of it and really recognize what's yours to do and the energy in your body and this one life to live. And yeah, and so I guess what I would say is, I think getting to a place where I had the job, like the job I thought I always wanted and the firm I was, while experiencing this other thing that really had purpose, impact, and cultural relevance, right? Like, consumer has not been a place where most of tech wants to be, right? Because you can't get to these 1000x returns to make the venture model work. And it was really hard for me to recognize that I was not going to just try to be the best at the thing I had trained for my entire life and career. I had a lot of ego and identity connected to it, but I married well. As you know, I love executive coaching. I have a battery of coaches who play a meaningful role in my life, dating back to my crew coach in college, but also executive coaches and others. And I think what I just realized was, if not now, when? And it's the quote, like, what are you going to do with your one precious life? And I decided to leave to go start something in sports, but without fully knowing what that was. Like, I knew I was always the person. I never had a gap in my career. I always overlapped. And I kind of knew I needed to sit in the pain of not knowing exactly. And I also knew I wanted a partner. I love working with a partner, and I didn't know who that partner would be. So yeah, it's really hard. I'm the breadwinner of my family. I was at a point in my career where it didn't make any financial sense to go do what I was doing. We are the first women's sports fund in the world still that's been raised. There are many funds now in private equity who do this as a portion. But I just knew, I guess. Like, look, I really don't know how to describe it more than that. And it was an incredibly painful journey. My HRV plummeted, but it's just spiking again, like only recently. So, I mean, and I do feel more alive and more in alignment and purpose and joy in every part of my life. And I think the mistake you can make in life is think like, oh, I can sit in a job that's just okay, or a marriage that's just okay. And everyone is on their own journey. And if you have the privilege to do the kinds of jobs that we get to do, I think really, like, that's where you spend a majority of your time. So anyway, that's the not so quick answer.
No, it's great. I remember back, there was a pivotal point in Strive where, after we had raised money and you had led the investment round at Upfront, what we did unfortunately wasn't working, and we were pivoting and trying to find out what was new. And I remember you asking me, what would you do if you were not afraid? And that was kind of a line that you repeated to me a few times throughout in the journey of kind of putting your fear aside, putting ego aside, putting the extent to which your work defines who you are aside. What is it you really feel pulled to do rather than what you're pushing yourself to do? And so I think that you followed your own advice on that one. So what is Monarch? Kind of what's the thesis? What's the fund?
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit of who your partner is.
Yeah. So I started Monarch with Jasmine Robinson, who is my extraordinary co-founder, who kind of grew up in sports. Actually, her dad was captain of the Tampa Bay Bucks defense back in the 80s, when that was a pretty low paid position. So you can look for analogies in the NFL and NBA to what we're doing now, where a lot of the value creation is like investing in those leagues in the 80s or 90s. Anyway, she grew up in sports at the 49ers and Causeway and other places. And we came together to start a women's sports fund. We invest in teams, leagues, and rights. We are an impact fund, non-concessionary. We believe that representation drives outcomes. People who live and breathe it the way I did at Angel City, the way she does, right? Like she's the hardest working person I've ever worked with. And Will, you and I are pretty hardworking. There's only one time she doesn't want to talk to me, 49ers games. And that's sacred and we honor it. And so we invest in the most mature part of the ecosystem. I think one of the things people kind of get in trouble around sports is thinking all sports is similar. But like the women's sports ecosystem, it wasn't even measured when we started Monarch. It was estimated to be maybe $500 million, right? The men's sports world market is probably estimated to be in the hundreds of billions, probably $500 billion. So like less than a fraction of a percent. In just the 3 years since we started Monarch, it's now measured and assessed very methodically by Deloitte. I love catching up with their team on their methodology because I am interested in methodologies. And now it's estimated to probably be about $3.5 billion, but that disproportionately goes to the most mature parts of the ecosystem where access is hard and where you need to show up with more than money or be really close friends with the control owner. And so that's teams, leagues, and rights in the most mature part of the ecosystem that tends to be soccer between the US and Europe, basketball in the US, golf, tennis. And we're thesis driven. We'll work on things years before we invest. We're often the only group under NDA working with leagues and federations as they're looking to spin something out, price something, et cetera. We're very operational, hands-on capital. We're all ex-operators coming out of teams and leagues. We now have by far the biggest portfolio in women's sports, so best practices across them. We work with brands and sponsors to bring them in, talent, et cetera. And we're now in 5 investments. 4 of them are teams. One of them is rights-based. I'll share some of them. 3 NWSL soccer teams, Angel City, Boston Legacy, and the San Diego Wave. We just invested in a very cool female-owned independent team in Berlin that spun itself out, that was inspired by Angel City, and I actually met through our HBS professor, spun itself out of a supporters group that started in 1889 and is building something very similar in Berlin, which of course is one of the top cities in the world and has really interesting characteristics from a GDP, et cetera, standpoint. And then I'll keep the 5th, and we have sort of a fun one pending for the follow-up. But we spent a lot of time, I would say, in basketball and golf, in rights. And then in the emerging sports like volleyball and softball and hockey. And there's some really interesting work going on there. We tend to go slow. We look for risk asymmetry where the downside is protected by franchise value or rights and the upside can look more like venture. So as an example, our first investment was in Boston Legacy. It's publicly reported that they bought their franchise for $53 million. Arthur Blank 2 years later just bought the most recent NWSL franchise to bring to Atlanta. I believe he paid, I think, $175 million, maybe it was $165 for that franchise. So just the paper itself is trading for more than 3x for that initial paper. As that protects the downside, access is hard. And so we try to be, a large minority investor. Sometimes we actually can be a control investor, but we show up, we do very few things that can drive cultural impact and that can help people understand why representation and hard work actually drive outcomes. We're an all-female team. We look for people who share our values and going the extra miles to bring in excellent talent that also is more representative of the players and fans. We're all female by accident. We will hire men. I shouldn't say by accident, but it's representation means all forms of representation.
Yeah. What have you taken from venture investing, and then what have you had to unlearn?
Oh, that's a great question. So I did start in private equity. I was in Morgan Stanley's captive private equity group, and then I led M&A at IAC, which is a public company where we did kind of private equity-esque structuring. So what I took from venture capital is, I think, a growth mindset around how to build and how teams I was so founder driven, as you know, sometimes to my detriment. Will, you convinced me that new educational systems could be built. And I still believe that is true. Much harder market, right, than some other markets. So I've always been really founder driven. And I think when you find the right intersection of founder and market, magical things happen. I think what I take probably most from venture is getting the right 2 or 3 people into each team is a huge differentiator, right? Like if I had pulled somebody out of our pickup basketball game to start Angel City with me who wasn't Julie, I don't think I'd be sitting here. It's like it was who she was and our dynamic and running through walls and so like being innovative. So I think like a lot of people get team building wrong. Like the best thing sometimes we can do for teams when we scope out lots of really operational projects is source talent from our network, interview that talent, give feedback. So I think exceptional talent and sort of a founder mentality, even if you're in a sports team, and those people want to work with people like us, right? Who can have the joy, have the energy, have the inspiration, push them in certain areas, create a safe space when things go wrong. And that's very similar, I think, to being a founder in tech and what makes certain companies work and certain companies not work.
Yeah. What have you left behind? What do you need to unlearn from tech investing?
I mean, in a weird way, I feel like I kind of accidentally left tech at exactly the right time for me. I think I had to unlearn the shell game and the marketing game and the like, you do 10 things and 2 will work. Like I didn't have to unlearn it. I wanted to leave that behind. Everything we work on, we think can work. And then we structure things for a certain returns outcome that looks more like growth equity. And I think, I don't hear 1,000 pitches with things that blow my mind that may or may not happen. And that's sort of like the one side of it. The other side of it is, I think I had to just like unlearn being comfortable with like having a significant loss ratio in your portfolio. And you can't have no loss ratio, I mean, you have to have some risk tolerance, but it's a very different risk profile. And really like it's patience. I think patience. I'm very patient. 2 of our core values are patience and discipline. The other 3 are joy, creativity, and collaboration. Oh, maybe the other thing I had to unlearn, we really collaborate differently. I think we're building an investment firm culturally that is extremely different than any firm I've been in. We do things that are time ineffective by others' definitions, but where we bring multiple brains, pass the baton back and forth. We just run our meetings. We run our work streams really differently and kind of have to be able to add value operationally. And we do it across fewer investments. So we have to be more right.
Yeah. I want to end on a couple of personal questions. Not too personal, don't worry. The kind of personal side of professional. So in preparing for today's interview, I listened to another conversation you had that was titled From Soccer Mom to Soccer Magnate, which I thought was a catchy title. You're a mom of 3. You've done all of this while having 3 girls that by all accounts are growing up to be wonderful adults. Talk about how you balance that. How do you balance the personal and professional? And this is your moment where you're going to give Jake a lot of shout outs and kudos. But yeah, tell me about that balancing act.
I mean, that is a huge part of it, and I always think it's irritating when people say partner well, because we all want to partner well. But I think being a good partner is actually committing to growing together. There's some fundamentals there. Like I remember actually another entrepreneur I spent a lot of time with came from, I think, 2 psychiatrists, which is fascinating. And he said the thing one of his parents told him is like, love your partner and show that love to your children. And I think there's so many ways like Jake and I have supported each other, and he's now an executive coach and he was my coach. And he's one of the most extraordinary coaches I had. Even though he was in private equity, he realized, but I think a lot of it is actually just communicating, seeing each other speak, like sitting down and figuring out how to hand things back and forth. And then, God, my girls are turning out really well. I'm so proud of them. And they're old enough now that like, can take a step back. And, I've certainly gone through my working mother guilt and I travel a lot, but I think, like we've role modeled respect and love for each other. And we've given each other space to like not be great at times. And how do we but I think we also just like, I think I learned how to be the parent each one of them needed, not the parent I needed to be, and to bring in the village. Like it's not always your romantic partner, right? It can be other people, and to really support them becoming individually who they each were meant to be. And you kind of learn with your first one, second one, and then the third one, they kind of raise themselves. So, but raising my girls has been the greatest gift of my life with Jake. And I remember one thing Fred Wilson told me, who's, I call him a mentor. He still sometimes denies that, but he said, I learned more. And he's obviously one of the great venture capitalists. He said, I learned more from raising my 3 children than I learned anywhere else. And it will make you a better investor. And I think he's right. Like the human side of all this, I mean, you've got to experience it. I think that is really important, whether you're a board member, a romantic partner, or a parent. It's like, when do you hold boundaries? When do you give tough feedback? When do you let them fail? And when do you just sit there with like unconventional love and hold them and hope you're around if they need it and you're working, and if not, find someone else who is.
Yeah. These last 5-10 years, I think as a friend and a teammate of yours, I've witnessed a personal journey that you've gone on and really kind of leaning into the kind of more woo-woo sides of yourself. I think you're historically a very type A person, went to Princeton, got an MBA at Stanford, investment banking, et cetera. In these last 5 years, I feel like you've leaned into the serendipity and the creativity and to exploring yourself. What guided you on that path? And what are kind of, as there are people listening that want to do their own personal exploration, what would you advise?
Wow. What came up for me is I wrote this letter that I just revisited because I'm sort of in a moment where I'm thinking about all of these things, to my girls. And I actually only had 2 out of the 3 of my girls in 2012. And I'd gone on this journey with my family to explore our Holocaust heritage in Poland called March of the Living. And I was there with one of my cousins who had been in 5 camps, and I stood with her next to her bunk at Auschwitz. And it was really hard, but I left and I wrote my girls this letter that I haven't given them yet. And I think I'm going to give it to my eldest daughter right before she goes to college. And I said to them, so I think this might've always been there for me in this letter: believe in something and invest in something that gives you community and gives you ritual and gives you intentionality around showing up over and over again, where you can just take a step back and just be and connect in ways that aren't about achieving or getting to the next mountain, et cetera. And even though I was in the middle of like numbly achieving at the time, I think it was in there. And so I think we all have it in there. And it's sort of like looking back to where you got it from. My mom was always kind of the spiritual side, and my dad was like the achievement side, or that's the message I have in my head. And I think over time, as you get older and you just find these moments where you're questioning something, and we're all going to have, whether it's in romantic partnership, in a job, in a friendship, in an injury, in something happening, health wise, where I think growth happens in discomfort. And I seek out self-improvement, and I always have, but I really sought it out in the last 5 or 10 years. And so I guess my advice would be, when you're in the most pain, know you can grow in whatever environment you're in. It doesn't come from changing your environment, changing your job, changing your marriage. It comes from changing yourself. And if you change yourself, the things you're in may change and work better or differently. And then if they don't, you make the changes. But I don't think I could have done it without coaches or, therapists. Like if you have a therapist, but you're kind of just not changing your habits, find a different one, find something daily, and I think like there's just lots of ways to do it, but I enjoy self-improving and, get into the Enneagram, astrology, human design. I got it all for you guys. Hold it loosely, figure out what works for you.
I love it. So our closing question, we ask everybody the same question. FranklinCovey's a leadership company. Who is a great leader that you have worked with or for, and what lesson can we all take from them?
I should have a good answer to this. Hold on. I mean, I think I learned the most about who I am as a leader now working at IAC. So Victor Kaufman was my boss. He was the vice chairman, and Barry Diller is the CEO. And it was, in a way, a place that was like maybe as much of a meritocracy as any place I worked. And they made me head of M&A, co-head of M&A at the age of 30. And I think it's being you and knowing your leadership style, right? Like my leadership style wasn't Barry's or Victor's, but they also really recognized like people who came in, did their work, had a point of view, were ready to go in and spar. Like there was an intellectual honesty to it. And then there was a consistent risk profile. So it's like, how do you allow that creativity and intellectual honesty to come together? And then who makes the decision and what's the KPI? To me, that's the most kind of profound leadership lesson I've taken. And I used to wear a bracelet that broke, but that is like something my grandmother said, who passed away at 101. And it was like, you be you, and then believe in the integrity and goodness of others. And those are like guiding principles for me. And so being me, I think, means like hard feedback and kindness. It means collaboration. It means like driving returns. And it means like really enjoying the people you work with. And it means like promoting people or giving economics in places where you have agency that maybe aren't aligned with industry, like not squeezing every dollar out of like what the industry tells you to do. And then working with great people. And maybe the final thing I'll say is like, we have incredible limited partners at Monarch, some of the biggest family offices in the world you would know. Melinda Gates and Pivotal and a wing of the Walton family. We also have the heads of many of the large, or at least a handful of the large private equity firms like Leonard Green or KKR or Insight. And getting to know how these iconic firms built themselves, a lot of it is just in the image of the founder who has a philosophy and holds it tight. And so we just did our reviews, and we did the reviews according to our 5 values. I don't want more than 5, and we move them out, and Jasmine and the rest of the team and I will look at them. Our mission lives and breathes, but it is real. And so I think it is you be you, knowing what that is, and then finding and hiring people who fit that, and you can review in that way, and then who you celebrate.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. This was wonderful. I've always enjoyed our conversation so much. I was incredibly excited for today's conversation. I remember back when we were raising our Series A. So for those listening, Kara led the seed round in my startup. When we were raising our Series A, investors would ask, what are you looking for in your ideal board member? Because at that time, the board was just Kara and myself. And I would say, there's a bunch of characteristics that we're looking for about industry expertise, et cetera. But the number one most important thing to me is that they pass the Tuesday 9 p.m. test. People would say, what's the Tuesday 9 p.m. test? And I said, well, when my phone rings on Tuesday at 9 p.m., am I going to be excited to pick up the phone from this board member? And I was always excited to pick up the phone from Kara. She was somebody who, as you said earlier, you encouraged me to dream bigger than I would have on my own. You believed in me more than I believed in myself so many times. And you helped me become a better person, a better founder, a better leader, a better partner. So I just want to express my gratitude to you. I'm excited. She has a big birthday this weekend, and I'm going to be flying down to LA to celebrate. I'm excited to celebrate over the weekend. And thank you so much for sharing your insights and wisdom with our audience.
Thank you, Will. I so appreciate you and our friendship and our partnership in so many ways. It's really been fun.
Wonderful. I hope everybody listening enjoyed it as much as I did, and hope you'll join us next week for another episode of Frank and Covey on Leadership.